Good morning to you all. In this seminar, we have Antony Martinez of the Portuguese Hl7 chapter that is going to present us how Hl7 International is organized and somehow how you can also interact with Hl7 Portugal. So welcome, Antonio. Thank you for accepting this invitation. And it's also a pleasure, as you are somebody that also were in this Masters of Medical Informatics at the University of Porto. So welcome back and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Yes, I am a former colleague of yours. I really appreciate all the knowledge that I acquired during the period that I had in your masters. It was like in the dinosaur ages, a long way ago. But yes, my name is Antonio Martins. I am currently representing Hl7 Portugal as an affiliate for Hl7 International. During this presentation, which I believe will take around 30 to 40 minutes, we will present you about our organization of Hl7, what is our process, and how do we govern our organization and standards development. This presentation has been originally performed by Line Seile, which is the chair of Hl7 Norway and a co-chair of Hl7 International. She was so kind to give me the slides, which I adapted also with some other sources. All of the slides have their respective sources from where I stole the information. Okay, I assume that every one of you already know the name Health Level 7 or Hl7. Our Hl7 organization has a vision. We have a vision that everyone in the world would be able to securely access and use the right health data when and where they would need this information. This statement seems to be fairly simple, but the solution for us as patients or practitioners or as any kind of stakeholder in the healthcare market to be able to share the information is really not easy. It's not an easy task. Sometimes you need information that actually is somewhere else. Some other times you have information that you need to share with others. And the way that you share that information, it's not an easy task, and it requires many efforts, mostly from the entity that has the information up to the entity that consumes this information. But the vision it's very clear, very simple. It's a very distinctive vision in this case, where we would be able to go into a hospital and be confident that the physician in that hospital would have the information from us in order to provide a better healthcare for us as patients. That is what we are looking for in the long run. So Hl7 has a mission, which is empowering global health data interoperability by developing standards. So Health Level 7, it's about developing the standards and making them available globally. We also promote the adoption and implementation of these standards together with other standards also, of course, so that we can accomplish our mission and our vision. So some of you asked, where does the name Hl7 comes from? Well, level 7 actually comes from the OSI model. It's called Open Systems Interconnection. It's a model where all data communications are done through digital communications in computers, and it's comprised out of 7 layers. which of them, only one, the physical layer, it's actually where the information goes from one place to the other. So imagine that there is a computer A and the computer B on the right side. So what happens is that in order for this information to flow from a computer to another computer, it actually goes through these 7 layers. The upwards layer, it's the 7th layer. It's where HL7 defines its standards and defines how the communication should happen. In fact, we are abstract about all the remainder 6 layers. So we do not care about how the information should be done in the presentations layer or the session or the physical one. So we don't care how does the bits of data actually move from one computer to the other. So we are working only at the application layer. So this meant that the organization was originally named in 1987 after this particularity, which is that we are only stating details of connection, a logical connection of information at the 7th layer of the OSI model. So Hl7 International, it's a standards development organization, what is called an SDO. We are an open and a consensus-based organization. This means that it's open to everyone that wants to join in and adopt, and it's open and it's consensus-based because we take decisions based on consensus, not on directives or rules that have not previously been agreed upon the group. It is volunteer-driven, so either Hl7 and in myself in the role of Hl7 Portugal, we have not-for-profit orientation, as well as every affiliate in every country and also Hl7 International. We can read more about it in the link that is provided below. Hl7 is an ANSI accredited organization. So we are an SDO, and we have been accredited by the American National Standards Institute as an entity that when we establish a standard, it also becomes an ANSI standard. So we follow all the requirements from ANSI regarding the development of standards based on consensus. We are also part of the ISO. So under the same concept, but for the scope, not only of America, but for the global scope, we also belong to ISO TC 215, which is where our standards are also published. So our standards automatically are ISO TC 215 standards after our approval by Hl7. So we actually developed the standards in a joint effort with ISO in order for them to become standards in ISO also. Who are the ones that participate in the Hl7 organization? Well, we have all sides, and we make sure that we have all sides of the cube regarding this data communication in healthcare markets. So we have many vendors and manufacturers of medical devices and vendors either of medical devices, but also of software products. We have consultants, which are the people that provides consultancy services in the healthcare market. We have healthcare providers of all kinds, from small to the biggest ones. We have the users, which could be also called the patients, as people that also participate in Hl7. We have associations, government agencies, universities from the academy, which is very important. We have the payers, which is many times the insurance companies or governments that many times are participating in the payment of the providing of care for the patients. And of course, the pharmaceuticals also play an important role and are part of Hl7 International. So you have been already discussing what is interoperability in healthcare. And one of the questions that we might want to do is, what is the market currently looking for? So the market is looking for faster implementations of interoperability. They want conformance and conformability testing regarding whether products comply or do not comply with the standards. They want an easy interoperability with a semantic level that is and can be applied through computers and not by humans. They want better quality, they want a methodology, they want us to provide tools, they want the systems to provide also a background or a layer for confidentiality and security in general. They want that the previous standards that already exist or the complementary standards could be in harmonization or harmonized with the standards being developed. And we want a full community supporting all these technologies and the way that we communicate information. And above all, all this would need to be simple. But in order for the full communication to be defined, there are lots of scenarios that needs to be taken into account. And this is beyond a single point-to-point interface. We should take a look into the full specification of the 7 layers of the communication that I showed you previously in the OSI model, not just level 7, which is Hl7 specifically developing our standards. So there must be plenty of other standards that we must apply, and this is not easy. So there is not a single gold standard that should be applied that can answer the question of interoperability in healthcare. So we need many standard development organizations that provide some pieces of the puzzle in order to accomplish the full scope of our vision. So for instance, one of the standards that we truly need are the terminologies. Terminologies are very, very important, and we have standard development organizations like the SNOMED, which is a standard that is in the terminology area. We need implementation guides that can integrate all the communication parties and define how this integration should be done. And we need a published and governed process that can support all these developments and that is updated throughout the time. It should not be static and released just one date and then it stopped. It must be maintained throughout the time. As we know, the world goes round and things get developed, new standards come up, so they should be always evolving with the market and with the new technologies and the investigation that is being done in these areas. Hl7 International is mostly, has dozens of standards that have been implemented, but the most important ones, what we call the primary standards, are these ones which you can see in this table. We have the consolidated CDAs, which is actually a set of implementation guides, a library of templates regarding clinical document architecture, which is the second line. Clinical document architecture is a standard that has been developed by Hl7 that allows us to communicate information regarding clinical information that could be understood as a document. So it persists throughout time, and it's not like messages, which is something that has a much more narrower or short scope in time. So CDA is one of our primary standards, and along with CDA, we have the CCDA, which is those implementation guides and templates that mostly are applied in the US realm, but are also adopted by many other countries so that we can communicate documents electronically. Then we have the Hl7 Fire. Hl7 Fire is the latest standard. It's the new kid in town. It's the new way of communicating information through devices and medical software. And it is very new, or fairly new, although it has been launched since 2012 as the early stages and has been recently approved as ANSI and ISO standards finally in 2021 in its release number 4. Fire standard, it's very extensive, allows us to send messages, to send documents, which of course are CDAs, and it's a very modern way to communicate using web technologies that are firewall friendly and that allows us to do an easy communication with fast implementation. Then we have Hl7 CCAO. Hl7 CCAO has been retired, but replaced by a new standard called Hl7 Firecast. Hl7 Firecast allows, basically the idea is to, in the desktop area, so we are not talking about servers, we are talking about the client computers, we have the possibility to have 2 applications that the physician is using. So these 2 applications could be and should be synchronized between them. So if I select a patient in one of the applications, the other automatically gets synchronized and focus on that same patient. This is called clinical context and has been for many years a standard of Hl7 CCAO, but now it's being replaced by the counterpart in Fire, which is called Hl7 Firecast. For the purpose of synchronizing the desktop applications. And then the most known standard that we know for many, many years, Hl7 version 2, it's unavoidable. It's the standard that has been around for a long time, that everyone implements. It has been adopted in all over the world, and it's a messaging system based on, of course, older technologies. Nowadays, we are promoting the implementation of interoperability through the use of Hl7 Fire, but Hl7 version 2 is still there. It's going to continue. We are currently on version 2.9.1, I believe, and it's still pretty valid to implement integrations using this Hl7 version 2. And then the last one, which came up around 2001, Hl7 version 3, was aimed to be an improvement of Hl7 version 2. It got too complex. The adoption from the vendors and from the communities was too complex. They didn't want to do it because although it was almost perfect, it covered all the possible scenarios, but the implementation was really, really a struggle. So we had to come up with the new ideas, and from there, Hl7 Fire came up. Hl7 Fire is kind of, instead of trying to solve every problem in the interoperability, we try to solve like 80% of the problems and leave the other 20% for a later solution. This means that the Hl7 Fire can be much more simpler than the previous Hl7 version 3, which had the objective to solve all 100% of the scenarios, and then it would require that the actual version 3 would be too complex to be implemented, and it relied on very, very good and interesting object-oriented concepts and a reference model for implementation, which we have learned a lot, but we have kind of simplified things, which are now a result of Hl7 Fire being so easy to use. As I told you before, Hl7 goes from a long way. We started in 1987, and now we have come up with a few milestones. Like, for instance, CCAO or version 2 started since 1989, so it has 33 years or something like that. It's very, very old. Then CCAO came up. Then CDAs came up in 2001. and Hl7 version 3 in 2004. Nowadays, the most important date is when Fire release 4 was issued in 2018. Sorry, I said before 21, but it's 2018, which is the first full version that is completely approved as an ANSI and ISO standard. So it has been a long way from Hl7. We are still having lots of work to do, but we have accumulated a lot of experience throughout the years. Then we have the affiliates. Myself, I am belonging to the Portuguese affiliate. So we have representatives in each country that takes the flag of interoperability in healthcare and the standards that have been developed by Hl7 International and promotes the same principles of our vision and mission in their countries. So we represent the country also in Hl7 International, and we represent the Hl7 International in our country. It's also a very important role. We talk with our government here in Portugal, for instance, or the legal entities. It's very important that we start discussing important issues regarding interoperability with the national health system or Ministério da Saúde, and probably the drugs, legal drugs or pharmaceuticals. So Hl7 affiliate discusses and gets into agreements regarding interoperability with these local government legal entities. Also, we have the responsibility to promote here in our country the implementation and the discussion of these standards so that they can be implemented and promoted in the best way. There are currently 39 affiliates, which Portugal is one of them, together with many other countries. Portugal is considered very young, since we are being members from 2016 only. There are other communities and people that are looked and focused into the implementation of the standards. And regarding Hl7 Fire, we have what we call the Fire Accelerators, which are communities and projects that are aimed and focused to accelerate the implementation of Hl7 Fire in specialized healthcare areas. Let's look now into the organization of Hl7 as an organization. Hl7 has a board, and we, in this board, we kind of have the whole governance of the Hl7 organization. We are made out of committees and councils. We have committees and councils for everything, like for instance, for advisory, for executive, for finance, governance, and as you can see, there is almost a council for everything. Here in this diagram or this organizational chart, you can see how do we lay out our board. One of the most important parts is the technical steering committee, as you can see here. From the technical steering committee is where all the technical work comes into place. And the technical steering committee is actually the aggregation of all the work groups that work in a specific environment or a specific area in interoperability for healthcare. So a technical steering committee, it's a group of people that are kind of the gathering of all the work groups that exist nowadays. So we promote technical leadership, and we are made to ease up the task of the work groups and the interconnection between them. There are lots of work groups inside this steering committee, and we have to make sure that they all work in synchronous with the same tools and possibly communicating within each other so that they are not implementing things in a different way from one work group to the others. And then we have the work groups, which we jointly call the working group, as the total set of all the work groups together. Each work group has a responsibility to develop technical solutions or standards regarding a special focus area. The work groups can also serve as a source for exploring new areas where we believe HL7 could be developing new standards. The work groups are open to participation, and all members of HL7 can participate in any number of groups. As you can see from this list, these are the current work groups that we have in HL7. We are working in almost all areas of the healthcare market. So we have standards that have been developed specifically for all the areas like patient care or financial management or imaging or genomics. Well, each of these ones have a special focus on a particular area of this providing of care circle of events. How does these work groups work? Well, they actually have meetings. They have weekly conference calls, and they have a triannual working group meeting. They participate in connectathons, and they have their meetings, which they have agendas on Confluence. Confluence is the tool that we use in HL7 to manage all our meetings and groups, and also the balloting process that I will talk to you in a few seconds. Between these meetings, the work groups collaborate by using the Confluence tool and by chatting using the Zulip tool that we have in order for the people to be involved. And of course, that the email server is still a way to discuss and try to promote the communication between the members of the work group. And then we have also the capability to make a vote. These votes are also managed through a platform that I believe it's Jira. So how do we develop standards? The standards are developed this way. We initiate a project when there is a subject under our scope. We prepare a document to be balloted with all the suggestions of the involvement from the work group, and the work group presents this document for balloting. Then all the members of the work group issue a vote regarding the document, and then we assess the number of yeses and nos, and we understand from there if there are too many people that are against certain subjects or disagree with the implementation of certain parts of the standard. So what happens is that we do a reconciliation, and we try to discuss with the members that have different opinions and try to convince them of either getting into an agreement of like a middle ground, or otherwise explaining further in the document how some certain process should be implemented. And when we feel confident that everyone has been clarified once again, we reuse or we re-improve the document, and the document that is being developed is proposed for a new balloting process. And we repeat this process until at least 75% of the people says yes, or ideally when everyone says yes to all the statements and the way that the standard is being presented to be implemented. So at the end, what happens is that we prepare a final document for publication, and then the document is finally published as a standard from Hl7. So what happens during the balloting process? The documents are actually able to have 4 possible stages. One of the stages of the document is informative. The next level would be draft document for comment only. So this means that people knows that this document was written with the purpose of providing some comments around the implementation of a certain standard, and it is meant to be just a comment and not the actual standard document. Then we have a draft standard for trial use, which is called DSTU, which is kind of the standard document that is in a stage before being approved. And when this document really becomes approved, then it's called a normative standard. So all members of Hl7 can participate in this balloting process, even non-members if they want to. That is the chance to review and comment and have impact on what are the next proposed standards for medical interoperability or healthcare interoperability. So this is the chance for people to really be able to make a difference. And by contributing with balloting, allows them to have to make the difference. These balloting processes occur usually 3 times a year, 1 month before each working group meeting. As I told you before, these negative votes must be accompanied or should be accompanied with a specific reason justifying the negative vote, and only when we have clarified and resolved the negative votes, at least to 75% of the people to agree with the implementation of the draft standard, that this standard could be approved finally as a normative standard. Also, please remind that when a standard is proposed as DSTU, there should be some kind of real implementations where this DSTU gets implemented and where we can trial for real life implementation before this standard becomes a normative standard and finally approved by ANSI and ISO, as well as Hl7. So the work groups must resolve the negative votes, either accept the voter's comment and recommend a solution, or negotiate with the voter and get them to agree to withdraw their negative vote, or declare the vote non-persuasive, and of course that the voters may appeal to the technical steering committee, sorry for the name, and of course also up to the board. They can also revert their same negative vote and for the next round of balloting. When 75% of the people have positive votes, then we are safe to go and hopefully go into a final publication of the Hl7 as a full standard. The balloting, as I also mentioned before, we have a tool for that, which is Jira, which allows the people to vote there and for the votes to be accounted. Also in our governance, in Hl7, we have a work group meeting. Work group meeting is where all the work groups convene together in a whole week of work, when we have all the general sessions. We have a plenary of the work group meeting, and we have educational opportunities. Sometimes we have connected funds, and the whole week helps pushing forward the standards development. It is a very important event, but in this latest situation of a pandemic, we have not been able to do our last work group meeting. It has happened as a virtual event. Thank you very much. This has been my slides regarding this Hl7 organization process and standard development process. Thank you very much for your attendance.